pairs of spinal nerves that attach to the spinal cord. There are 8 cervical spinal nerves, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal spinal nerve. The spinal nerves are named according to the vertebra where they exit the spinal cord. The cervical spinal nerves exit above their named vertebra, and the rest of the spinal nerves will exit below their named vertebra. Let's take a closer look at the components of an individual spinal nerve. Rootlets arise from the dorsal and ventral side of the spinal cord that will converge to form the ventral and dorsal root. The dorsal root has sensory fibers and the ventral root has motor fibers. The bump on the dorsal root is the dorsal root ganglion. This is a sensory ganglion where the cell bodies of unipolar sensory neurons accumulate. There are no synapses in this ganglion. The ventral and dorsal root converge to form the spinal nerve, which quickly branches to the dorsal and ventral ramus. The dorsal ramus has motor and sensory fibers that supply the deep muscles of the back and overlying skin. The ventral ramus has motor and sensory fibers that supply the muscles, joints, and skin of the limbs and trunk. Here's another close-up picture of the spinal nerve. We see the ventral and dorsal rootlets, ventral and dorsal root, spinal nerve, and the dorsal and ventral rami. Here's the sympathetic trunk. We see rami communicants that are the communicating branches between the ventral rami of a spinal nerve and the sympathetic trunk. Gray ramus communicants are found at all levels of the spinal cord and contain postganglionic fibers that are traveling away from the sympathetic trunk. White ramus communicants are found at the T1 to L2, L3 level and contain preganglionic fibers that are traveling toward the sympathetic trunk. Let's follow the course of a presynaptic sympathetic motor fiber. It originates in the gray matter of the lateral horn of T1 to L2 vertebrae. It'll follow the course of the ventral rootlets to the ventral root, to the spinal nerve, to the ventral rami, to the white ramus communicants, where it will enter the sympathetic trunk. Once that fiber enters the sympathetic trunk, it can either synapse at that level, ascend or descend the trunk to synapse at a different level, or pass through the trunk without synapsing at all. Presynaptic parasympathetic fibers originate in the gray matter of the ventral horn of S2 to S4 vertebrae. They'll follow the course of ventral rootlets to the ventral root, to the spinal nerve, to the ventral rami, and will follow the course of pelvic splanchnic nerves to reach their ganglion on their target organs. Visceral sensory fibers will follow these parasympathetic fibers retrograde to reach the dorsal root of the spinal nerve.